President Trump is blaming the Fed for the market sell-off, calling the central bank, quote, out of control. Bloomberg's Kevin Cirilli spoke with Senator Mark Warner about those comments. Take a listen.
Absolutely not. Again, one more example that this president doesn't understand our rules, laws, and norms. The Fed was set up as an independent entity that should not be unduly politicized. And I think the president complaining about the Fed raising interest rates, I've not seen it before at this level in my whole life.
And just quick follow-up, do you have any thoughts with regards to the market sell-off?
I've been worried that we have been a bit, the market's gone up so quickly for so long that there would be some level of correction. Clearly, we've still got a strong economy in the United States, but with the weakening of many of the rest of the world's economies, with China weakening, with, frankly, a lot of our third world nations, almost in free fall, I'm not totally surprised at all by this assault. But predicting, that's why I stay in the political business rather than the stock business.
Well, speaking of the global economy, tech companies have really started to increasingly become more global. And you've said that really data is the new big oil and the honeymoon is over for Silicon Valley. What do you mean by that?
Well, what I mean is that we've had over the last 10 or 12 years, and I think a lot of the American tech companies, particularly around social media, have been extraordinary successes. And they've almost been kind of glorified by other business leaders, by political leaders. But what we saw starting in 2016 is that there is a gross underbelly where people can be manipulated, where extreme views on either end of the political spectrum can be exaggerated. Some of the data we've seen shows that the vast majority of the political content on the far left and far right in this country is not generated by Americans, but generated by either foreign interest, oftentimes Russians, or automated accounts, so-called bots. And I think as you see people start to question whether they want to get all their news from Facebook, whether they're going to move to other platforms. The problem is, if they move from Facebook to Instagram, you've still got an enterprise that are owned by the same corporate parent. So there are real questions about big tech, whether they have a level of power that we've not seen since the beginning of the 20th century with some of the oil companies and railroad companies. The difference in today's world, though, is even if some of these American-based companies had some restraints, there are Chinese companies kind of nipping at their heels that have none of those restraints. So how do we introduce more competition? How do we make sure, particularly in an economy where startups generate virtually all the net new jobs, that the path, at least in the app world, for a startup isn't only to sell out to one of the large enterprises of Facebook, Google, or to have their technology copied by one of those enterprises and they get destroyed that way.
But even as we sit here today, the Wall Street Journal reporting just within the last couple of days that Google has had another data breach and that 500 million folks were impacted by that. And according to their reporting, it was one of the reasons they weren't coming forward was because they were concerned about the regulatory risk and the reputational harm that would come to the company.
But that should not be their right to make that choice. Google's a public company.
So what
this is a material fact. Well, I believe whether it's the Google breach, whether it's the Equifax breach, where 150 million Americans' personal financial information got stolen, the Securities and Exchange Commission can determine what is material or not, and there needs to be a mandatory reporting. We have already got existing laws. They need to be influenced, and they need to be enforced. We also need a common data breach standard. Right now we have 47 different laws, different states that are all about what is the requirement to notify the public or notify the regulator when you have a data breach. This is the realm where I think a lot of both misuse of our personal information and, quite honestly, the ability for foreign nations to interfere in our markets, in our society, in unprecedented ways.